We'll have the link up
Okay.
after this.
All right. I have a lot to say about this. This is kind of a think piece. It's going to take a lot of twists and turns. So, Pride organizers say sponsors are pulling back amid DEI rollbacks and economic fears. So, Pride Month is coming up pretty soon. They've been shutting down a lot of DEI departments and different corporations, and predictably, a lot of them are pulling out of sponsoring Pride events. Several of the nation's largest LGBTQ pride celebrations are down hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate sponsorships this year, with some event organizers saying promised funds have been withdrawn or reduced, and others saying they've been ghosted by longtime corporate partners. Pride organizers say some companies fear being targeted by the Trump administration over participation in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, while others are preserving cash in a tumultuous economy. Quote, I know that they're facing tough decisions inside those organizations, and I don't want to call them out. I want to call them in. Suzanne Ford, the executive director of San Francisco Pride, said of disappearing sponsors. We will remember who stood by us and who didn't. When it was politically popular, they were lined up. Hold that thought. Eve Keller, co president of USA Prides, a national network of LGBTQ pride organizers, said members across the country have reported receiving significantly less in sponsorship dollars this year. Some of these smaller rural prides are down 70 to 90% when compared to the average year, she said. Quote, we're trying not to sound a huge alarm or to make this the only focus, but when we are down money, we're down safety and security and accessibility as well, she said, adding that most prides don't want to make any cuts to their security measures. So instead, they're holding fewer and smaller events. Okay, so the tone of the article and the tone of coverage that you're going to get on this in general is, oh, how terrible that these corporations are not supporting Pride anymore. I would argue that you have a tremendous opportunity to free your movement from the corporate vampires that have hijacked it and use that community as a human shield to deflect from conversation about their corporate practices, much to the detriment of the public image of that community. It has caused that community to be associated with the bosses. You can't have a liberation movement associated with the bosses that exploit labor. Um, so we'll get into that. So Suzanne Ford, who was quoted in that article, gets paid $155,000 to put together this parade. So if you look at the other pretty high-ranking people there, the treasurer and the president, they do what I would consider the right thing for what's presumably a community-oriented charity. They take the president takes $0. The treasury takes $250. Why are you taking $155,000? Wouldn't it maybe be you're worried about security? Maybe take a salary cut. Maybe take $50,000. $50,000 seems reasonable to do that. This is the least egregious example of where this money goes. So Eric Hoffer, in The Temper of Our Time, very famously said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. So look at this picture. Look at this picture of people holding up this pride flag with the Amazon image on it. Does that look like a social justice movement to you? When Amazon gives all this money to these pride parades, who do you think gets this money? Do you get this money? Do members of that community get this money? Well, the idea would be, well, it filters into events. Well, a lot of it filters into people's pockets, as we'll see. Now, in terms of associating a liberation movement where you're asking people to be allies, to have solidarity with you, How do you justify associating yourself with a company that's so hostile to workers as Amazon? Is that really good for promoting acceptance and allyship with the community? What are you telling workers of your solidarity towards them? And I'm not really blaming the community. Again, it's the leaders who are getting rich off of these corporate sponsorships who I think have driven things in this direction. But the fact that these corporations are pulling out, that's not something I think that should be reversed. That's something that should be embraced. And I think, as we'll see, there are a lot of members of that community who would feel the same way. Amazon fosters unsafe warehouses. Exclusive, I feel like I'm drowning. Survey reveals the toll of working for Amazon. Amazon faces NLRB complaint as Teamsters push for negotiation rights. So if your whole thing is you're asking people to express solidarity, how's that going to work? How are you going to get people to stand up for you and then hold an Amazon flag in a picture? Doesn't work. There are much worse sponsors than Amazon. There are a lot of arms dealers who also sponsor Pride. Now, this is something that is undercovered. If you get into this and you're somebody who's on the left, who's always lamenting the way the liberals are represented in the media as representing the left, and the Democrats are jumping out in front and pretending they're the left, it's very much the same in the gay community. There are a lot of people in that community who don't like this shit, but they're not profiled. They're not featured. DC Pride Parade has just been interrupted by this banner blocking the Lockheed Martin float. So there are people trying to shut this down. Here's the Lockheed Martin float at Pride. This was pretty infamous. This got around a lot. But as you can see, this is 2023. That was when people seemed to have really noticed it. But that action that we showed, that was back in 2017. So this was going on for quite a while. And it's not just Lockheed Martin. Here's Northrop Grumman getting in on the action. I'll take out the music just in case. We've had problems with things we would not expect to get flagged on. So there they are in South Dakota, promoting their Pride bona fides. And once again, just using that community to cover up what they actually do. Now, one of the worst offenders, Human Rights Campaign, not coincidentally, look at their compensation. Wow. President gets $704,000 plus other compensation, almost $750,000. VP $355,000. The COO $349,000. So that's where a lot of this money goes. Now, worse than that, and this is the largest self-described group representing that community. They actually had as a platinum donor, as a platinum member, they have different rankings, Northrop Grumman. And people did come out and protest. So here you see, folks may be puzzled why protesters tried to block the HRC float at the LGBT Pride Parade. It's because the ostensibly progressive group is on the platinum level take from arms manufacturer Northrop Grumman, despite the fact the company's bombs are sold to Israel and used to slaughter Palestinians. Shame on you, HRC. Okay. And not only that, they actually went to HRC's headquarters to protest.
Human rights organization funded by companies furthering a genocide.
Right now, you can see crowds around here gathering as a protest is forming outside the Hilton Hotel. Protesters say they're here as LGBTQ plus members taking action against one of the most revered queer organizations because of its relationship to corporations complicit in the genocide in Palestine.
My name is Rend. My pronouns are she and her. I identify as a Palestinian queer. I'm also Muslim.
Hello, my name is Noel Daya. I'm 22. Identify as queer. I'm Jordanian, Palestinian, and Syrian.
Bunch of queer folks behind me, allies, Palestinians, people from all walks of life are here to essentially bring attention to the fact that HRC is complicit in the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza by way of their financial relationship with Northrop Grumman, which is a weapons manufacturer that has been and is today sending weapons to Israel to genocide Palestinians.
We absolutely cannot stand by celebrating funding a genocide and receiving funding from those who are quite literally dropping the bombs, creating the missiles, creating the components for the fighter jets that are killing Palestinians right now.
Okay, so you don't see that represented in the media. I'm in this space and I take more interest in these kinds of cultural conflicts than a lot of people in the space do. And I never saw that. I never saw that until I really started digging into it and doing the research. It is very much the parallel of what's happened in the left on the whole. People who are real left, socially conscious in a meaningful way, labor-oriented, anti-war activists are invisibilized. And the people who represent a very decadent version of leftism that's really about self-expression and an ever-expanding panoply of lifestyle choices, those people are pushed out front. People who have the privilege to have the kind of politics where you're going to hold up an Amazon flag with pride on it as if there's no contradiction in asking for solidarity while allowing that company to use you as a human shield. There is a very large segment of that community that's not down with that shit, but they're invisibilized. You really don't see them represented in the conversation. You want to add anything before I move on?
No, that's okay. I mean, I have something, but I could wait.
All right. So GLAAD is another one. GLAAD is another one of these. And again, wow, look at what the president gets, man. Over $800,000. Deputy president doing pretty well, $350,000. See, this is why they want these corporations to keep giving them money, because it's going into their pockets. It's making people rich. Are the people in the community getting this money? They're not getting this money. You might say, well, it's for events. Wouldn't it be better to do less events that are not morally compromised by partnership with some of the world's most evil corporations? Wouldn't that be better? Go to a more volunteer model. Get these people completely out of the way. How much of that money is from people's individual donations? You could still get that, right? Maybe downscale it a little bit. Maybe do a call to the community. Hey, we need more volunteers than ever because we don't want to take this corporate money. It looks to me like you'd have a lot of people who would answer the call if you did that. Now, New York Times did an expose, a pattern of lavish spending at a leading LGBTQ nonprofit. GLAAD paid for its chief executive to fly first class, rent a Cape Cod house, and remodel her home office. It may have violated IRS rules. This is why these people want this money. This is why they want these corporations to continue to partner. And this is why they didn't care about how this would tarnish the image of the community to partner with people like Northrop Grumman and like Amazon. They didn't care about that because they don't actually care about that community. We're well past the movement stage and the business stage. We're well into the racket stage with a lot of the actors in that space. Now, I just wanted to throw this in to make it clear. I'm not saying don't donate to any groups that are oriented towards this community. They're not all like that. Here's Pride St. Louis. They don't take any money. I found that was typical of the smaller organizations, whereas the ones in the big cities, not surprisingly, is where you get the big grifters. So I'm not saying all these organizations are corrupt, but the bigger ones seem to be. So now, what has the impact of this been? Now we've talked at times about the trans issue, which in my opinion, a lot of the more extreme manifestations of that even people in this community largely don't agree with, especially when it gets into kids and sports and things like that. I have long been of the belief that these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, these not-for-profits, have largely pushed that. And particularly when you look at their executive compensation, after gay marriage passed, well, how are they going to continue to live the lavish lifestyle to which they're accustomed? Because their fundraising largely depends on generating a sense of emergency and being under threat. They are in large part at cross purposes with the community they claim to represent. Because if that community really gains the total acceptance that obviously is what most people would want, they're out of a job. They're out of business. So they are highly motivated to constantly find hot button issues that will trigger conservatives so that they can fundraise off it. They are not interested in acceptance. They're interested in constantly generating controversy. You'll never get to a place with organizations that are motivated by the level of fundraising they can take in, who are really going to care about the community. And the proof is in the pudding. Why are they taking money from Northrop Grumman? That's a good look. So same-sex relations. Now, this is the good news. Marriage is still supported by most in the U.S., but not surprisingly, support among Republicans has gone down. Now, I think that is largely the doing of these organizations, and connecting the movement in the mind of the public with actors like Amazon. You put it's allowed the right wing to cast that community as being part of the neoliberal agenda.
Right. The World Economic Forum.
The World Economic Forum, the globalists, exactly.
The depopulation, the blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Right. Now, surprisingly,
the own nothing and be happy. Whereas MAGA is own nothing and be angry.
And be angry.
Yeah. Own nothing and be permanently aggrieved. Own nothing and be aggrieved.
Now this is the good news. Even after all of this, which I think has been terrible for the image of the gay community. Even after all of this, a solid majority still find same-sex relations morally acceptable. And even the downtick among Republicans is not as bad as I would have thought it would have been before I did the research. As with support for same-sex marriage, Democrats 81%, and to a lesser extent independents 68%, are more likely than Republicans 40% to say relations between gays or lesbians are morally acceptable, whereas a majority of Democrats have thought same-sex relations are morally acceptable since 2006. No more than half of Republicans have said the same throughout Gallup's trend, except for 3 readings: 51% in 2020 and 2021, and 56% in 2022. The current 41-point gap between Democrats and Republicans ties 2011 as the largest on record. So, yes, there is a big fall off in support from Republicans. I would argue it is partly tying the brand in the public mind to globalism, to Amazon, even to Pfizer, as we will see, as one of the sponsors of HRC.
I would argue that number would be higher on a secret ballot. Just saying.
Well, you can only run those in a urinal. So can you imagine Trump doing this now? Can you imagine him this is Trump in 2020, holding up a pride flag. Would he ever do this now? So this is what I'm saying, man. These organizations that purport to represent that community have done nothing but hurt that community and enrich themselves doing it. Because this is very bad for business for them. This is very bad for business. They don't want the Republicans to accept the gay community. That doesn't bring in the checks. Oh, legislation passing in red states limiting rights for drag queens. That's where you make your money. If there is no draconian legislation being passed against gay people, well, they have to instigate it. How else are they going to raise money? Right? You write them a check when there's a sense of emergency.
And
And
I remember Peter Thiel in 2016 got that huge ovation at the RNC. He said, "I'm a proud gay man, a proud Republican, and a proud American," or something, and they gave him a huge ovation. Yeah.
Right. That's not good for business for these people. And it's, this is not just in this sector of social justice movements. It's all of them. They busted, Ibram X. Kendi, $40 million went missing at his institution. It's all a misleadership class that is really ill-serving the people they claim to represent. So this is some of the human rights campaign. Now Northrop Grumman is no longer listed on their sponsors. So I think they got scared off that. But you still have Amazon is on there, JP Morgan Chase, Apple, Pfizer, which forget about it. You think you're gonna get the conservatives. You better not have Pfizer as a sponsor. So just absolutely no concern for the public image of the community that they claim to represent. Now, this is a history that has largely been erased. I'm sure a lot of people who are in that community, particularly the radicals in that community, are well aware of this history. Very much like with the left and the liberals, there is this divide in the gay community where you have certain people who went with the idea of gay rights as acceptance within bourgeois liberalism. And that's actually kind of become the cliche of gay people today, right? In a suburb with nice manicured lawn and that kind of thing. That very much like the liberals are pushed out front as representing the left, there is this older tradition of gay rights movements being closely tied to socialist and communist movements. And that's almost been, just like it has been on the left, it's almost been memory hold that that's what these movements really originated in. So just a little bit on that. Gays have been involved in the struggles for the emancipation of the working class as revolutionary agitators, labor organizers, and partisans of socialist, communist, and anarchist movements since the days of the Paris Commune and the First International, when for many those three categories were interchangeable. The first significant support the gay civil rights received in world history came at the end of the 1890s from the flagship Marxist Socialist Party of the Second International, the German Social Democratic Party. This is the first party to ever put forth anti-discrimination legislation for gay people. Harry Hay, who was a pioneer in gay rights in America, stood up against the House Un-American Activities Committee. He was a member of the Communist Party. Harry Hay never stopped fighting for gay liberation using the Leninist tactics and strategies that he had first learned in the 1930s, the building of effective organizations as part of a broad, inclusive People's Front to advance the struggle. Called before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1955, one should remember that homophobia was cultivated by McCarthyites as a companion to their generic red baiting. He stood up to the committee, treating them with the contempt they richly deserved, although he felt bitter that it was difficult to get left attorneys to represent him because of his open homosexuality. And this is really what you see here. Hay became an active critic of the mass gay rights movement, which emerged in the 1970s, particularly its penchant for involving itself in narrow interest group politics and supporting traditional Democratic Party politicians in what was a sort of political protection racket. Yes, there was a split between this more socialist, militant, labor-oriented, Marxist gay rights movement and the lib gay rights movement, just like what happened with the left, where the libs went one way and the actual traditional left remained, fighting the traditional left causes. That's what you see here. The gay rights, the representation of gay rights that Harry Hay was against, ate the movement, at least in the public mind. And that's how you wind up with a gay pride parade being represented by a union busting organization like Amazon, or being represented by arms manufacturers like Northrop Grumman. So I would argue the last thing you want is to shame these corporations into coming in. With the activist faction of this movement, this is a great opportunity to drive that out, to drive these corporations out, and to reclaim it for what it originally meant. I'm not saying you have to become a member of the Communist Party. I'm not myself, but orienting more towards the labor solidarity that it was rooted in, I think would I met many people out at Workers Strike Back just now in Seattle who were members of that community who were much more coming out of that tradition. So now, the final objection you might get to something like that is, well, how are we going to have these pride parades? It's part of how our community comes together and celebrates. Well, you know what, man? In New York, we have the biggest Halloween parade, I believe, in the world. And it is almost entirely dependent on people showing up with their own creativity, their own costumes. 2 million people attend. It has 50 to 60,000 attendees. And it's on as massive a scale, I think, as any pride parade in the country. This is them doing Thriller at last year's Pride Parade. Can't use the music, obviously. Does this look like a small event? Look like something that that you wouldn't be proud of? And they don't go to Amazon. They don't go to these corporations. I'm going to share a list of the sponsors for this. And
this footage is from New York City Photos YouTube channel. You should check them out for more New York scenes.
There you go. Okay, so where is it? It's next to me, right? All right, so here you go. Oh, I have to take it down?
Yeah, you got to take the video down first.
All right, so they do have sponsors. They do have sponsors. Who are the sponsors, though? Local. Spectrum. All right, Webster Hall, it's a local club. Local radio stations. Rubenstein Foundation, that's a little bigger. Here is a local theater. I'm surprised they have that kind of money. Monster Energy Company, Costume Cult, some Broadway shows, right? Party City, they're probably not blowing up any kids in Gaza. It's all right. Lilac Chocolates, that's a local brand,
local.
Goes back to the 20s.
Yep.
You got some support from the city. So if you can do that with local sponsorships, I don't see any reason you can't do a pride parade with local sponsorships. So I felt like it's important to talk about this because you're going to get a lot of this spin right now from the same kinds of people who turned the pride parade into what it is today, which is essentially a human shield for a lot of the worst corporate actors in the world, which, as you could see from those demonstrations, a lot of the community would love to wrest it from that. Here's your golden opportunity. Here's your golden opportunity. While they're running scared from the Trump administration and they don't want to be involved, push them out the door.
Yeah, and I would say you should push them out the door because, as these corporations prove all the time, they actually have no principles. So
right.
when the woke backlash comes back and it's President Rachel Levine in 2029, they'll come back to the pride. Like if you let them back, they'll come back.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
They don't actually care.
Right.
They don't care. They just want to be cozy with.
They just want to use you.
And so if woke is the zeitgeist, they'll go woke. If anti-woke is the zeitgeist, they'll go anti-woke. Doesn't matter to them. They don't have convictions of any kind.
Right. They never supported you.
Right.
They never supported you. And
right.
That is the strongest argument for refocusing back to the roots of the movement and class and worker solidarity, because that group is actually ideologically aligned with you. These corporations are not ideologically aligned with anybody. They'll go along with anybody who's going to slip money in their pockets. That's it. Once you become bad for business, you're out.
Exactly.
Please clap.